Hi everyone, Ethan Lunchtano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for our monthly segment, Why You Know Review, where I talk about a series of albums that have come out over the past few months that I didn't make the time to or didn't get a chance to review just by itself in a solo album review, so I'm just going to talk about it and address it quickly in brief in this video here. The new Killjoy Club record, Reindeer Games, which effectively is a full-length album collaboration between Psychopathic Records artists, namely ICP and DeMafia 6, sort of the afterbirth kind of side project of 3-6 Mafia members, DJ Paul and company, although now they have less members than they did when they started. But in regards to this record right here, this is one of the strangest hip-hop collaborations of 2014. And not just because of the names here, but also because it's not like ICP and DeMafia 6 come to some kind of middle ground here where all the songs sound cohesive and it's just kind of a meld of their styles. Quite literally, there are parts that sound like they would be on a DeMafia 6 tape and parts that sound like they would be on an ICP album. The album goes, or the songs here go, from really great parts to really awful parts in a split second. From great, gritty, aggressive verses to just cheesy as hell choruses with chugging guitars and sung vocals. Personally, I didn't care for it, and I wouldn't recommend you listen to it unless you're either a hardcore fan of one or both of these groups, or you've just got some kind of morbid curiosity. Next, the new Grouper album, Ruins. Grouper, if you didn't know, is Liz Harris, singer, songwriter, ambient artist, one of the most interesting artists in ambient music currently. She has come out with fantastic records in the past, like Dragging a Dead Deer Up a Hill, as well as the AIA double album, which is my favorite release in her discography. She came out with a kind of underwhelming album, in my opinion, after that, and now with this latest record of hers, it kind of comes with a sound and a style change. Rather than dealing mostly in guitar and reverb and a kind of lo-fi and somewhat distorted recording aesthetic, Liz Harris is stepping forward, past the lo-fi, past the distortion, past the reverb, and giving us songs that are pretty much vocals and piano. But still, these songs manage to be incredibly quiet because her playing is so gentle, and she is singing at the volume of a whisper. And in my opinion, aside from the kind of experimental closing track on this record, I was pretty underwhelmed by this thing. It's just not that compelling to me. I like Liz just so much more when she's experimenting with sound and she's finding way to make very beautiful and gentle songs that kind of hang in the walls of sounds that she creates. I don't think these walls of sound are so amazing that they would stand well on their own, nor do I think the songs are so amazing that they would stand that well on their own, but together they make a fantastic combo. This is Liz essentially subtracting one of those things from the equation, and in my opinion, the results are just a little mixed. Next, we have the new Wiley album, Snakes and Ladders, prolific UK-based grime artist, grime figurehead, really. He's been dropping music for years. This is his latest. He had some pretty good singles leading up to this thing, which I enjoyed, but the album as a whole, while I do love the instrumentals, I think they hit really hard. I do think Wiley has a good flow. He sounds great on a beat, but we already knew that. But as far as his lyrics go, it's just really the same old Wiley, nothing really all that new or fantastic to report. Wiley's never been the greatest lyricist on the planet, and at least on this album anyway, he doesn't dive that deeply into things like storytelling or themes or narratives. It just seems to be some just basic braggadocio a lot of the time without any lines or wordplay or punchlines sticking out that much or really wowing me. But still, if you are searching for a grime record this year to listen to, I would give this thing a listen, as well as the new Gets album too. Definitely give the new Gets album a listen if you're dying to hear some more grime. Next, the new This Will Destroy You record, Another Language. These guys are a post-rock outfit. This is their third full-length LP. Their debut album is their most celebrated. If you enjoy post-rock, I encourage you to listen to that record. However, here with this album, I feel like they've just painted themselves into a stylistic corner a little bit. There's not that much in the way of surprises or anything. thing here. On their sophomore record, I enjoyed some of the noisier and sort of odder tracks they did on that record, even though it wasn't amazing to me as much as their debut album. At least I kind of felt they were going into a different direction. They had me feeling like I could look forward to whatever they were doing in the future. But here on this new record, it seems that they just moved into a safe direction and are just kind of dishing out post-rock cliches in every direction. And it's just not that compelling to me. These guys have become a post-rock band, a band that you can only expect post-rock from, versus a group that just happens to be playing post-rock, like Swans, or Godspeed You Black Emperor, or Sigur Rós, groups that are constantly labeled with that genre, but you can always expect them to work outside of the blueprint of that genre. I can't really say as much for This Will Destroy You at this point. Or the new Jacob record too. That underwhelmed me quite a bit as well, for the very same reason. The new Cannibal Corpse record, a Skeletal domain, classic death metal band, brutal death metal band, Cannibal Corpse. And this is just kind of another record from Cannibal Corpse. There's not really all that much you can say about it if you want just kind of just brutal, bloody, gross lyrics and guttural vocals. And Cannibal Corpse infamously are one of the most straightforward death metal bands of all time, ever. Their sound is as basic and as plain as day as a knife to the throat. They are just kind of continuing that tradition here. If for any reason you are just morbidly curious and want to give your ears to a death metal record that isn't necessarily going to challenge you or confuse you, or maybe just try to get into some of the more brutal sounds in death metal, I would encourage you to check this record out, or some of their earlier stuff, like The Bleeding. Next, the new Gerard Way record, featuring the famed frontman of My Chemical Romance, although he was the frontman. They're disbanded now. Oh. And now he's doing solo stuff here. Hesitant Alien is the title of this thing, and the sound overall, it's just some kind of blurry, reverbed, alternative rock and pop rock. Not quite as bold and as fast-paced and as energetic as My Chemical Romance's earlier stuff, but I do like the fact that it is a little bit more raw and lo-fi than the band's last few albums. It's a decent release if you're just looking for a solid pop rock record with a kind of hazy aesthetic and mystique to it, then I would encourage you to try this thing out. Next, the new Twin Peaks record, Wild Onion. I don't really have anything to say about this album. It's like the most nondescript garage rock I've heard all year. Period. And the new Nachtmystium album as well, World Left Behind. This is an American black metal project. You might have seen me review their Silencing Machine record a little while ago, gave that album quite a bit of praise. And from what I understand, this is the project's farewell album, which is kind of strange to me given that they are fronted by Blake Judd, who is one of the few, if not the only, constant members across the band's career. They've had a rotating cast of guest musicians, many, over the years. And it's kind of a mediocre record. It's just all right. It's not quite the high point that Silencing Machine and some of their stuff in the 2000s was. And what makes this record taste even more bitter is that it's kind of mired in a bunch of drama having to do with the band not doing right by fans who are getting merch, or by other people who happen to be doing business with them. And this has been covered pretty generously on numerous metal websites, Stereo Gum as well. But I would say if you're not familiar with these guys, don't let that drama deter you. You can hit up the internet, hit up a streaming service, or, get a CD from a record store who has a copy of that CD, or whatever, if you're interested in trying out their music, because they are one of the more notable American black metal bands out there, or at least they were before they disbanded. Next, the new At the Gates record. These guys are a Swedish melodeath, and they are back! Yes, they disbanded in the 90s, and there's almost a 20-year gap between this record and the band's last record, which is easily their most celebrated in their entire discography. So I was looking forward to giving this thing a listen, but this album, it just underwhelmed me a little bit, just because of the production sound. It's just got a sort of generic, punchy, modern metal production sound to it that just feels so by the numbers, much in the same way that the sound on the last Black Sabbath album felt kind of by the numbers. The distinct sound that At the Gates had back in the 90s has sort of been stripped away by this embrace of what is sort of new and in fashion as far as metal goes. But don't get me wrong, as far as the technicals of this album, the vocal performances, they're most definitely on point. The writing isn't that bad either. If you are an At the Gates fan, you probably already heard this record, but if you are a fan of the sound of 90s death metal, this is most certainly not a bad return for one of the classic groups in that decade. Next, the new Contortionist record, Language. This record is essentially a big progressive metal turnoff for me, with some gent influences, some deathcore influences too. The sound of this record just completely deters me. The springy guitars, the sometimes clean guitar leads and chords, the cleanly sung vocals that are so anemic and so dreadfully boring, and then how the band suddenly transitions to these chugging guitars with just brittle distortion on them and these deathcore vocals. I'm essentially getting two flavors of metal here that I have zero interest in coming together to make an album that I have -5 interest in. In its pursuit for flawlessness, all this record does is destroys the mystique and the danger that made metal music so appealing in the first place. And finally, the new Jessie Ware record, Tough Love. Jessie Ware is a pop singer hailing from the UK. This is her sophomore full-length LP. You might have seen me review her last album, Devotion. Didn't really care for it, though I loved the singles off of this record, especially Wildest Moments. Still a fantastic song. Baby, in the wildest moments. And this record, in my opinion, is essentially a sequel to that album, which could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how much of a fan you are of that record. But to me, it's not necessarily the best thing, because the deep cuts off of Devotion were just incredibly underwhelming and not that interesting. It seemed like every piece of instrumentation was just trying to bland out the mix and just try to be as unintrusive as possible. And Jessie, while I do love her voice on Wildest Moments and some of the guest tracks that she's done over the years, she doesn't really come off as that bold of a singer on all of the tracks on that record and on this record too. This album as well, I just feel like I get a gauntlet of songs that would make for great background music at a clothing store in the mall. While reverb and soft instrumentation are not necessarily a bad thing, for every melody and for every beat and every piece of instrumentation to sound so impeccably soft that the overall song, structurally, melodically, texturally, just sounds like a blob or just a bunch of mush, there's nothing that gripping to me about that, unless the music is explicitly dream pop and is going for just a really serene aesthetic. But this album isn't really that. It's just kind of middle of the road. It's a little reverby. It's just kind of soft. Not so soft that it's being ambient or experimental, but too soft to be gripping, sharp, colorful, compelling, body rocking, and just earworming pop music. I do like that she seems to be carrying that torch though for 80s R&B music and 80s synthesizer pop music and that whole sophisti pop thing. However, I think she is yet to come through as a bold, timeless voice in these genres. And those are my thoughts on these records. Transition. If you've given any of these albums a listen, what did you think of them? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Why You Know Review, forever.